观众朋友您好，欢迎收看2018加州的选举季的特别报道。今天我们要采访的嘉宾呢是加州州务卿的共和党竞选人律师 Mark Meuser 先生。今天我们要谈论的一个热门的话题呢是加州选举中的存在的一些舞弊现象。Well, Mark, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I understand you're running for the Secretary of the State in California. How many words can you type per minute? Do you know Microsoft Excel spreadsheet or how's the phone skill?
Well, I can type over 100 words per minute, but the Secretary of State is not your typical secretary that you see in an office building. The Secretary of State is the chief election officer of the state, which means they're responsible for maintaining California elections, making sure that we have fair and honest elections so that if you're eligible to vote, you're able to vote, and that your vote is counted.
Now, on the federal level, it's not an elected position. It's actually appointed by the President of the United States. But the state is actually a public office. Now, why are you running for this office?
Well, yes, you're right. On the federal side, the federal Secretary of State, they're head of the diplomats. The states are a little bit different, and I don't have any foreign relationships with Japan, China, or Germany. My job is to do the elections and a couple other secretarial type things for the state, like registering businesses, registering notary publics, head of the state archives. But why am I running for this? I'm running for this. I was asked to run for this by a group of election attorneys because I was an election law attorney, and they said, Mark, you understand the problems of California elections, and you can articulate those issues without sounding like you're wearing a tinfoil hat. I mean, the news media loves to tarnish those people who are talking about election integrity. But you need somebody who understands the issues, who can articulate the issues, who's willing to investigate the issues and raise awareness of the issues of the problem we have in California with our election rolls.
Now, I understand you were involved in the recall in Michigan.
Yes, Michigan and Wisconsin. I was one of the first attorneys that was there for the recounts. Over the course of 8 days, I was in 2 different states, 6 different counties, just watching and observing the process, making sure that every legal vote cast was counted.
Right. Now, we heard so much about how the election was rigged in 2016. We started hearing more and more in the media nowadays. Now, how serious is the problem in California, voter fraud?
To understand the concept of voter fraud, you have to break down the 3 parts of an election. The first part of election is who's registered to vote. Mm-hmm. The second part is who actually votes. And the third part is counting the votes. From my experience in Michigan, Wisconsin, and being an election law attorney even here in California, the counting of the vote, while there have been stories in the past of widespread problems with the counting of the vote, generally speaking, that is a fairly accurate process. The problems with election fraud tend to come in the voter rolls and the people casting the vote. Are people who are legally eligible to vote actually the only people on the voter rolls, and are they the only people voting? We know that here in the state of California, we have 11 counties with over 100% voter registration, meaning that there are more people on the voter rolls than are eligible to vote. Los Angeles County has 144% voter registration. San Diego County has 138% voter registration. That means between those 2 counties alone, there's more than 1.8 million people, more people on the voter rolls than are even eligible to vote in those 2 counties.
Now, that begs the question, how did people get on the voter roll? If they are not eligible, how did they get started in the first place?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the county registered voters. And they receive somebody's voter registration, and they simply enter it into the database. And if somebody wasn't eligible to vote and they registered to vote, there does not seem to be any proactive reviewing of these applications to make sure a person's eligible to vote. Mm-hmm. A lot of the problem comes after the person, a person who was eligible to vote, who becomes ineligible to vote. Case in point, somebody dies, mm-hmm. and they don't remove the name from the voter roll. So Social Security may stop writing checks. You know, the IRS knows that you're dead. Everybody knows you're dead, but it seems the voter registrars is not talking with the other forms of the other government entities, and asks that you remain on the voter roll, and it creates the opportunity for special interests to come in and cast illegal votes for people who have passed away. Another way is if you've moved. I talked to somebody just the other day down in Orange County. Her son moved out of her house 18 years ago. And every single election for the last 18 years, she receives in the mail a vote by mail ballot. It costs $4 per person to mail balloting materials. So that means for 18 years, we have been sending a ballot to an address where somebody does not live.
Well, this sounds like human error of government, and it is not news because if you remember, Immigration Services sent visas to the two hijackers who caused atrocity on 9/11.
Yeah. And that's why there's a lot of conversation like blockchain technology, how we need to get our government entities talking with each other. I mean, it's the whole problem. You mentioned 9/11, the whole problem with the CIA not talking to the FBI. The same thing is going on. You move, you talk to the USPS, you talk to the DMV. You don't, but for some reasons, Secretary of States and registered voters don't seem to talk to each other. So you start creating these bloated voter rolls. You start creating more applications, and we're not doing our job of cleaning it up. And then what happens is special interest will takes advantage of government incompetency, government negligence, and they then will go and take advantage of that because here in California we do not have voter ID. And so what you'll see is somebody knows that somebody's dead, so they'll go in and just say, hey, I'm George Smith of such and such address, and they'll cast a ballot for George Smith, even though George Smith may have been dead for 15 years. And they'll take advantage of like the homeless, minority communities, or the youth, and they'll get a whole busload of these people, and they'll go from precinct to precinct. They'll tell them ahead of time before they go in, you're going to vote for this person, you're going to vote for this person. And we know, so the people who vote, those votes are getting counted, they're being counted accurately. The question comes in, how many fraudulent votes were cast? And that's where the problem really seems to be here in the state of California.
So you're saying it's not a few isolated incidents we're hearing about people receiving, seeing 83 ballots show up in one address. This is more widespread. This is like a statewide issue.
Yes. CBS did an investigation, and it was just a cursory examination. I think they found like over 300 people who've been dead over 20 years who have voted at least 10 times. I mean, that's not even comparing the whole state database. That's not looking at everything. I mean, that was just people who had been dead for 20 years. We know that jury service summons, 19% of those get returned as undeliverable as addressed, moved, dead, not a citizen. And the main source.
I can testify to that because I do have relatives who immigrated from China, and they're currently just a green card holder.
Yeah.
But they did receive last year a jury duty letter.
Yeah, and we can, somebody checks the box, I'm not a citizen, and goes back. The problem is jury service is not talking to the Secretary of State and saying, hey, these are the people who say that they're not citizens. Can you check your voter rolls and make sure that you clean them off the voter rolls? And sometimes, there's been some county registrars who do get that information and they look, and they, and sometimes there is people who are non-citizens who are on the voter rolls who are in fact actually voting. And they turn those over to the DA, and it's up to the DA to start prosecuting those cases.
All right, we're going to take a short break. 好的，观众朋友，我们先稍作休息一下，之后呢，我们再继续这个话题。Well, Mark, you just told us about all the possible ways that the voter roll can get bloated in cases in some of the counties, 11 counties. Now, where did this number come from?
You can find this number multiple different places, but Judicial Watch has brought a lawsuit against the state of California and Los Angeles County individually for this. And these are numbers that they have put forth in the federal lawsuit where they said, here's what the census data says, and this is what the voter rolls say. And so that is the number that they have used in their federal lawsuit, saying that the Secretary of State and the County Register of Voters are not doing their job in making sure that only those people who are eligible to vote are on the voter rolls.
I want to understand the reason behind this lax voter registration policy here in the state of California. Are we trying to encourage people to vote, make it easier for people to do the necessary vetting? That I thought you had to be a citizen to vote. That's the law.
Yeah, the California Constitution says that in order to vote, you must be a citizen of the United States. In fact, the requirements to vote in the state of California is you must be 18 years old, you must be a resident of the state of California, you must be a United States citizen, and of course, you must register. So those are the four elements to vote in the state of California. Now, the thing is that you have counties who are responsible for maintaining the voter rolls, but then the Secretary of State is to make sure that they're doing their job correct. So where Los Angeles County has 144% voter registration and San Diego has 138% voter registration, right in between those two counties is a county called Orange County, and they have 87% voter registration. That register of voters actually is more diligent in cleaning up the voter rolls. He uses more databases. He spends more time making sure that he removes from the voter rolls those people who are not eligible to vote. Is he 100%? No. There are people who get through the cracks, but he spends more time at it, and so that's why he has like 87% voter registration, whereas counties who do not put time and effort into it have what we call bloated voter rolls. And that's, as Secretary of State, you're responsible for making sure you have fair elections across the state. Right. And so if you have counties that are not doing their job, it's important for the Secretary of State to say, hey, you guys have to do your job. And if you don't do your job, then I, as the Secretary of State, am going to take over it and make sure that your county is following the laws of the state of California and making sure that you are not unfairly prejudicing the voices of everybody else in the state, because you have a lot more opportunity for fraud.
Now, we just talked about how in the state of California, you go to voting booth and then you don't have to show ID to vote. You can just simply see what name is voted, or present your name and then you get a vote. I want to know is why the state of California has implemented voter ID law, and what's stopping us from doing that?
It needs a vote of the legislature. And so for the last 40 years, the legislature has been controlled basically by the Democrat Party here in the state. And it hasn't been an issue of voter ID until, basically the last 20 years is where the national conversation has been such that states have been looking at voter ID. And for the last 20 years, the Democrat Party has been in charge, and the Democrat Party is not interested in voter ID. Most of the states that have passed voter ID have been Republican states, although there have been some states, like Rhode Island was one of the first states to do voter ID, and they were they're a Democrat-controlled state.
So what we're alluding to is this some sort of a conspiracy that intentionally we have a fair and open election?
Well, I'm going to say that I'm going to leave that to your listeners and watchers, opinion. I can give the facts. The fact is we have 144% voter registration in Los Angeles County. We have 11 counties with over 100% voter registration. Are the election officials deliberately trying to steal elections? I don't think I can say that. I think they're just trying to follow the laws that are in place. Now, whether the legislatures and the laws that they are choosing, if they're trying to make it easier for special interests to take advantage of lax voter, record keeping, that's up for your watchers to make that determination. There are, as long as we've had elections in this country, I'm a reader of history. Last year alone, I read over 111 books, averaged over 100 pages of reading a day. But I read a lot of history. I read a lot about election law. As long as we've been a country here in the United States, there have been election fraud. Why? Because there's a lot of power in elected position. You have control over purse. You have direction of where the money gets spent. So there's a lot of power there. And as long as there's been power in election, there are those people who are going to try to see how many rules that they can break in order to get that power for themselves so that they can personally finance.
All right. Well, it's not surprising in the state of California now we're officially a sanctuary state, and the law enforcement can't even ask the criminals the arresting their legal status. And then, not to mention, you can go to driver's license even if you're an illegal immigrant here. So even if you probably implement the voter ID law, people can still find ways to vote even though they're not eligible.
Yeah, voter ID is never going to be a be-all, end-all. Sure. You know, you have to always be vigilant. You always, you have to understand that people who love power, who love money, are always going to, break as many rules as they can to try to get that. Not everybody, but there are going to be a serious number of people who do it. Sure. And so as a Secretary of State, you can't come into it like there is no fraud, nobody wants to commit fraud. You have to come in it as a sheriff. Your sheriff doesn't go, nobody speeds, the speed limit is up there, nobody's going to speed, so I'm not even going to look for speeders. No, as a Secretary of State, you got to come in with a mindset of, yes, the law says that you can only vote once, and the law says that only those people who are eligible to vote are on the voter rolls. But I know that there are people who are going to want to break the law to try to get personal power for themselves. And so I need to be vigilant to find those people who are committing voter fraud, and I'm going to make sure that we try to catch those people so that way we can have safe, honest elections.
And what's the punishment for if someone caught committing voter fraud?
It could be a felony. You could spend 5 years in jail. I mean, there's different types of election fraud, and there's different statutes that apply to various different things, but many things like if you destroy somebody's ballot, that's like I think it's $10,000, 5 years, up to 5 years in jail, or I'm not sure of all the code sections, but that's a fair representation.
Well, in the case of my relative, for example, if she receives the ballot, even though she's a green card holder, she voted, let's assume, and then can you hold up in court by saying that I was given the ballot, even though I wasn't eligible, but the government give it to me, let me vote?
Let me tell you a couple stories here that your listeners will really probably appreciate. There was a young lady from South America. She came to America. She worked as a medical transcriber as she went through medical school. She went in to get her driver's license. She had her green card paperwork in front of her. The DMV official said, "Would you like to vote?" She said, "Can I?" He said, "It's up to you." So she relied upon him and checked the box that she wanted to vote. And the state sent her balloting materials. She relied upon that. And then when she finished medical school, she had a good job, she was ready to become a citizen, and she appeared before an immigration judge. And one of the questions she had to answer was, have you voted? Well, yes, she relied upon the DMV official, she relied upon the state that sent her balloting materials, so she checked the box, yes, I have voted. The federal immigration judge said, you should have known that you were not able to vote, citizenship denied for life, and oh, by the way, you are deported.
Wow.
So someone who had spent years in this country, doing it the right way, relied upon a government agency, and that was not good enough, and she actually ended up being deported. She appealed it all the way up the line and lost it every single level. Now let me give you another one. A young lady from the Philippines married a U.S. military officer. They moved to the United States, started life. She went in to get her driver's license, had her green card paperwork there. She didn't check the box that she was a citizen, but the DMV official did. And she received balloting materials. She voted. She appeared before the immigration judge. She had checked the box. Yes, I voted. She didn't say that she, was a citizen or anything like that. The DMV, checked that box. And she had citizenship denied for life, deported. So the thing is, non-citizens who end up voting can jeopardize their citizenship when they appear before an immigration judge. And so that's why it's so important for the Secretary of State to be proactive in reviewing the voter rolls and removing from it those people who are not eligible to vote. Because you are making victims of those people who are trying to create a better life.
Sure.
Like your mother or mother-in-law.
Right. So basically, you're saying that even though the state is currently is defying some of the immigration laws and not cooperating with the federal agencies, but if you vote, you're still even though you're not eligible, you're still violating the law. You could be facing the deportation.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
So this is something that cannot be taken lightly.
It should not be taken lightly at all.
All right. So let's. On your website, you talked about how, so according to some researchers, our state, how does our state fare compared to other states in terms of fairness of election?
Okay, let's actually start with how the United States does. According to a Harvard study, there are 28 Western democracies in the world. When it comes to election integrity, the United States is ranked 28th. So we have, when it comes to election integrity, the United States is already one of the worst election integrity states or nations.
Right.
Now that we understand where the United States is in the world, look at the state of California. The Pew Research Center did a survey of all 50 states, and they measured it across 14 different platforms, like the military ballots, like provisional ballots, election integrity, all the way down the line. And it was determined that the state of California had the second worst elections in the entire nation. Second worst elections.
Wow. So I happen to notice this. In the last few years, as you know, we passed a few laws here in the state that to criminalize some individuals who used to be felons. Now they're just committing a misdemeanor. People who are stealing property less than $950, intentionally exposing other people to HIV viruses. Now, one of the requirements for voting is actually you cannot be a convicted felon, and you cannot be in prison. Does this mean if these people will get released on the streets, if they get a vote, who are they going to vote for? Of course, the officials who passed the laws and let them out on the streets. Is this some sort of, if things like this, how come that every time there's an issue of voter fraud brought up, it seems like the mainstream media, CNN, just quickly dismisses, even the President Donald Trump just said that a month ago, it was quickly dismissed. How come if there's nothing to hide, why can't we have transparency to launch an investigation, to look into this, do some audits, to clean up the voter roll?
Well, the Secretary of State is responsible for doing the audits, doing the investigations, and starting prosecutions. And the thing is, we're seeing in Texas right now, over the last couple of months, there's been multiple cases of the starting of prosecutions. Sometimes it's been done by Republicans, sometimes it's been done by Democrats. The thing is, there's a lot of power, as I said, in elections. And those people who have that power sometimes will abuse that power to make sure that they can keep their power. And so you can't just point it at one particular party. You have to be vigilant across the board for it.
Right.
But it's up to the Secretary of State to be vigilant in inspecting and auditing. The current Secretary of State has the mindset of there is no voter fraud. So if you do not believe that there's voter fraud, you're not going to do anything.
Right.
It'd be like the sheriff. Well, there's nobody out there speeding, so rather than go out and sit in my car and try to catch those people who are speeding, we're going to just sit in our sheriff's office and drink coffee and eat donuts all day. That's not what the sheriff does. They have to be out in the community. They have to be, the sheriff knows that there are people who are going to commit crimes, whether it's breaking in or stealing or whatever, and so they have to patrol the streets to try to make it safer.
Sure.
The Secretary of State needs to do the same thing. They need to be out there patrolling the elections. They need to be inspecting the voter rolls and making sure that only those people who are eligible to vote are on the voter rolls. They need to do some audits, inspections of who voted to make sure, oh, this person's not a citizen and they ended up voting. Well, we may need to do an investigation. Or wait a second, this person's been dead for 20 years and they're voting? Maybe we need to try to figure out who is voting for this person.
Sure.
And that's where it's important for a Secretary of State to be proactive
So with the technology we have today, we have ways, means to do it. Actually, I've heard reports there are 11 ways, practical ways to clean up the voter rolls, but currently the state of California only doing 3.
Yeah, you're pulling that from one of the articles that's on my website. Mm-hmm. People can read that article by going to markmeuser.com. That's MarkMeuser.com. And this came from a Supreme Court case that was heard in January of this year. The decision hasn't yet come out yet, but in that case, some people sued the state of Ohio saying, Ohio, you are too aggressive in cleaning up the voter rolls. And the state of California and the state of New York said, yes, Ohio is being too aggressive in cleaning up the voter rolls. And by the way, here are 11 different databases that the Ohio can use to review their voter rolls to make sure that only those people who are eligible to vote are voting. Right. Of those 11 different ways that the state of California said are valid ways to clean the voter rolls, the state of California is only doing 3 of them. So it means that the state of California knows of 11 different ways to clean up the voter rolls, and I will actually contend that there are more than 11 different databases out there. There are more than 11 different databases out there. But of the 11 that they have told the Supreme Court are valid ways to clean up the voter rolls, they're not even doing half of them. They're only doing 3 of them, which goes to my point is that the state of California is basically just sitting back and just saying, register one and all. We're not going to do anything to make sure that we clean up the voter rolls to make sure only those people who are eligible to vote are on the voter rolls, which is mandated of them by both the federal government and the state government.
Great. Mark Meuser,
yeah,
for a fair and just election for the state of California. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.